Welcome to Laughter in the Law, where we talk about the law with a lighthearted twist. Hey, this is Jackie Hauser with Laughter in the Law. I'm here with Diane.
And we're here also with Sophie, because if you've seen any of our billboards or fun social media posts, Sophie makes a appearance every once in a while, the little cute black poodle that Jackie owns. And she just would not stop whining until Jackie started holding her.
Yeah, so I had to pick her up. We're sitting at a pub table, and so I have to pick her up, and this is not really a two-seater. but,
you do not look comfortable.
I am not. I'm hot.
But she looks comfortable.
But she's just like a wet little doll here, like just a rag doll. And we'll see if she starts snoring. But
at least she stopped crying.
That's right. The incessant. She has terrible separation anxiety, and so the crying is just incessant sometimes.
I think you ingrain that into all of your pets, though.
I do. I don't know how I do it, though.
They can't stand being away from you.
Well, it's because I'm so lovable.
Oh, that's it. That's it. That should be our next billboard. Jackie Hauser. She's just so lovable.
It works well with the pets. It doesn't work well in my love life, but with the pets, it works out great. Anyway. And that's fine, because the four-legged babies, they're the best.
But at least you haven't made your kids have separation anxiety.
No, I can barely. Once again, they're just, I made them so darn independent. I'm like, wonder what they're doing today. I have to make appointments to have lunch or dinner with them. But no, I'm very proud of them.
Spoiler alert, I'm one of them.
Very proud of how independent
Let's periodically remind our target audience that not only am I your office manager, but I'm also your favorite daughter.
You are my favorite daughter. That's absolutely true. And you know as well as I do that if you couldn't do your job, I'd fire you.
This is true. This is true. Luckily, I think my mom taught me to have a really great work ethic.
Yeah. I would still love you, but I would fire you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
What are we talking about today?
I thought it would be a great idea to share more stories, because we all love stories. Mm-hmm. And you're such a great storyteller. And a few podcasts ago, we were talking about what the jury does and does not know. We were sharing that with someone that we had lunch with recently, and he was talking about how he was recently called to jury duty. And what was it? It was a criminal?
It was a criminal murder trial.
Criminal murder trial, yeah. And so they started out with about 100 people. And really interesting that I learned from this conversation, too, is that if you try to get out of jury duty by sending in a response, they defer you, which means that they just throw you back in the pot and you can be called again within months.
They may or may not defer you, but you can either be deferred or excused. And I probably should have done some homework on this, and I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you go ahead.
Were you in mid-thought? Mm-hmm. It's either 70 or 72. I can't remember what the age is, but there's some age where you can just say, I'm too old, and you don't have to come back. Mm-hmm. Now, you still can serve. It doesn't mean that you're excluded from serving, but you can use age as your excuse, and you don't have to serve. And then they should take you out of the pool. And you probably just got through accidentally anyway. But if you get your jury notice and you can't serve, like one time I got a jury notice and I was actually on the day that the jury notice was going to start, I think Mom was going in for surgery or something, or maybe it was me going, I don't know, it was something like that. So I just said, have a surgery scheduled for such and such a date, and they deferred me to another date. So they put it off for 6 months. So you can either get deferred, or you can be refused and you got to show up anyway, or you can be excused. So those are your choices.
So what he was trying to do, he didn't want to be deferred. He wanted to show up, be excused, and possibly not be called back for another 2 years.
Because once you serve, you only have to serve once every 2 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At most.
Yeah.
So he's there. It's the second day. It's down to about 40-ish people for a criminal trial.
He shows up the first day.
Oh, yeah.
And he tries to get that. Once again, he tries to say, hey, I know these lawyers, and they're not going to take me, and I just want to get a deferral or get out of this. And they're like, no, we're just going to leave you in the pool. Mm-hmm. Have a seat, read your book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there he sits with 100 people on day one. But then day two, like you say, he comes into the jury pool room and it whittled down to 40.
Yeah.
And
this is people, this is during jury selection. So attorneys are selecting people to sit on the jury. So you go from 100 down to hopefully 12.
Yeah.
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 So he's there, and long story short, he was able to be just excused, and now he can hold off for another. He knows that he won't be called for another 2 years. But it then made me think, what if you get through all 100 and you still haven't picked your 12?
Yeah.
What happens?
A lot of times you're going to have 12, and then you're going to have a couple of alternates as well. You may actually have 14 or 15.
Okay.
Yeah. And most jury trials, as well as civil superior cases, we're going to pick some alternates because we want the 12. And somebody drops dead, somebody gets the flu, somebody can't come back. We're just going to move one of those alternates into the seat, and you're picking 14, 15 people. Mm-hmm. And your question is, what happens if we exhaust the pool?
Exhaust the pool. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Okay. Then the Superior Court judge has the authority, and I've only seen this happen once in the courtroom, but we were selecting a jury for a medical malpractice case, and it was in a small, tiny county, and we blew through the jury pool. We used every single one between plaintiff and defense. And so the judge just, I'm assuming it's in his judge book up there on the stand, he just issues an order right there in court and says, Mr. Sheriff, it is hereby ordered that you will collect 20 members of this county and report back with them at 2 p.m. Court is adjourned. Boom.
And he just goes and picks people off the streets.
He picks people off the street.
Wow.
So the question is, are you a resident of this county?
Uh-huh.
And if you say yes, you are hereby summoned to be in court at 2 p.m.
Wow. I'm sure there are people that had that interaction and they go, am I being punked?
Yeah, seriously. You're hereby warned by me at no cost. If you're ever walking around Dollar General, Walmart, TJ Maxx, and some sheriff starts approaching you and you know you're not getting arrested, you might be being summoned to court. And so you might
for possible impromptu jury duty.
Yeah, so the best answer is I don't speak English or I don't live in this county. But yeah, we all left the courtroom, and at 2 o'clock, here comes the sheriff back with 20 people. And I just remember vividly, I can't remember what this one man said, but this one elderly gentleman was irate.
Wow.
He was irate about being ordered to come to court, not getting a proper notice, and blah, blah, blah. And he just stood up and let the judge hold it. This is ridiculous. This is an abusive process. How can you do this?
I am a citizen of the U.S.
Blah, 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 blah. And the judge said, this is not an abusive process. This is your civic duty. And he made some comment like, he came today, but you can't make him do anything. He made one of those kind of comments. And the judge said, yes, we can. Just as we ordered you here today, I can order you to stay until this jury is impaneled. And I can even give you a place to stay if I need to.
Whoa.
Will that be necessary?
Whoa. I haven't packed a bag.
That's right.
Don't worry, we got some orange jumpsuits.
And I'm sitting at counsel table, and it's like a tennis match. You to the left, to the right. What is it? I'm like, ooh, that's good. What you going to say to that? I think he's one-upped you on that one. What you got to say about that?
He's got the higher ground.
Yeah. And he's got the fellas with the guns. Anyway, wow. Mr. Hot Pants sat down. I don't even think he was ever called. I think we called a couple more people. We got our jury impaneled, and they released the other people. So Mr. Hot Pants, I think we certainly wouldn't have kept him. As angry as he was, no, we would have never kept him. We would have found some reason like he's crazy or something and got him off of there. But yeah, I remember that distinctly. And then I remember another jury story where we were going to be in trial. And see, whenever we're getting ready for trial, we get a copy of the jury list. And now back in the day, you knew everything about the jury. You knew where they lived, you knew their addresses, you knew their date of birth, and of course you knew their full name. And that's great information to have. You can do a lot of research. This is back before we had social media, internet, everything else. But we could do a ton of research on jurors with that information. Today, you don't get all that information. You get basically their names. And if you want more, you actually have to petition the judge. You have to petition the court and tell them why. And you've got to have a good reason, good faith basis. But back in the day, we're going to trial and we get this jury list And this is whenever I lived in my hometown before I moved. And sure enough, on my jury list is my neighbor across the street. He's going to be on the jury. And I'm like, clearly, he's not going to make it because he's going to say he knows me, and he's going to say, I love her. She's a great person, and I love her kids, and I love her family, and they're always at my house, or my kids are at her house, and how can I be fair? How can I rule against her whenever I'm going to have to come home and look at her? We're going to talk to each other in the front yard and stuff like that. So I knew he wouldn't be kept. But he didn't know he was coming to court for my trial, and I certainly couldn't go over there and say, hey, buddy, you're on my jury, or you're on the panel, you're on the list. So I just had to keep it quiet and couldn't talk to him about it.
Did you avoid him in the hallways?
I did. I really was on high alert for him in the courthouse. And I think I did see him in the courthouse and just gave him a nod, like, hey, but I didn't talk to him. And, of course, whenever he got into the courtroom, he obviously understood why. And poor fellow, we went through like a day and a half of jury selection. And his name was the last name called. And he had sat there for a day and a half. And I was like, I just kept hoping his name would be called. He could be excused. And nope, sat there a day and a half. And then he was excused. So,
what happened when they got him up?
We'd asked the same questions over and over, so everybody knew what the questions were whenever he got pulled into the hot seat. And so he just got up there and he just said, I'm not wasting anyone's time. I know her. She lives with my neighbor across the street. And I cannot be fair to the other side because I know her and I know her family. So that was basically it.
Wow. Did y'all ever talk about it afterwards?
Yeah, we did. But he was just there for jury selection, so he didn't really know a whole lot about the case. But we just laughed about the fact that he just kept sitting there going, oh, please call my name. Please call my name. Please call my name so I can get out of here and go do something else. But
so since he was the last person, and obviously he's been considered for jury, was he being considered as an alternate? Did you have your full 12?
I say he was the last person. The way that our county handled jury selection is, let's say that we had 100 people. They would throw 50 of them over on civil and 50 of them over in criminal. But if you didn't get picked, you went back to the jury pool room. So you went back to the main room. So he was probably the last in our pool for that day. And I think maybe the next day they sent some more over and just gave us some from the other pool. But that way you didn't run out of jurors, usually.
I think that's a good strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, that way it just helps with managing what you need. And that way no one can say, oh, we can't see the jury, so we're going to have to continue this case. Nope, we got plenty of people sitting out there just waiting to get on your jury.
Do you feel like after all your years of experience that you can read the jury?
I try. Obviously, we know things that we like and dislike. And in each case, you're looking for somebody different. But I try to read the jury. I've done it very well at times. And then there have been times that I've regretted. I didn't listen to my gut. And sometimes you just can't help it. You don't know who those names are they're literally being picked out of a hat. And so you don't know who's going to be called next. I think for the most part, we try to be able to read the jury. We try to watch them and try to stare without stalking, that kind of thing.
Do you ever hire private investigators? If you get the jury list ahead of time, do you ever hire private investigators to investigate any of the potential jurors?
Yeah, on our big cases, we certainly would. If this was a huge case, like a medical malpractice case, huge products liability or something like that, we certainly would. We would do background searches on the jurors. We had a case one time where it was a trucking case, and one of the questions was, we wanted to know if anybody had an experience with trucking. And so we hired a PI to go out. We wanted to know where people lived. We wanted pictures of their houses. This was very in-depth, a very big case. And this one juror, we asked him one of the typical questions, what do you know about trucking? Do you have anybody in your family that's a trucker? Have you ever been in the trucking business? Do you have a CDL? Those kind of things. And he said, nope. Nope. We had a picture of his house right in front of us in a binder, and parked at his house was an 18-wheeler. I think it was an 18-wheeler. It may have been a logging truck. I'm not sure which, but there was a tractor hooked on to some trailer at his house in his yard. Now, maybe that belonged to his son, his wife. I don't know. But it just gave us the willies for a minute, and we didn't pick him.
You didn't call him out on it?
No.
You don't do that?
No.
You don't want to show your hand like that.
No, we didn't call him out on it.
Have you ever had a liar? Sorry. Have you ever had a juror? Have you ever had a liar?
You ever had a liar?
Have you ever had a juror think they were doing you a favor by a potential juror thinking that they were doing you a favor by getting up and saying no, they did not know you, even though you knew they did?
No, I've never had anybody say they didn't know me. I've had people say that they did know me, and I got to smile and shake my head, but I'm like, I don't know you.
Don't know from Adam.
One girl got up there one time and said that we went to school together, and I'm like, when? Where?
You went to a very small school,
yeah,
too.
I don't know you. But she was adamant we had gone to school together. So I'm like, okay, great. I don't want to look like I'm obtuse or anything. I'm like, okay, great. That's good to know. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have had, like, whenever I was in the bigger firm, I've had attorneys come back after they've picked a jury, and they'll say, hey, I've got 2 of your cousins on the jury.
Oh.
And I would usually go and sit and watch some of the trial and talk to the attorney and things like that.
Do you have any other interesting stories? Anyone that said anything like outlandish or... Well, you said earlier about how you miscalculated certain jury selections, like maybe regretted choosing certain ones. Can you go into more detail with that, or is that getting too specific?
You're just going to point out all my flaws here.
Oh, you are a flawed hero, too.
That's right.
We are all human.
A lot of times your case is won or lost in jury selection, really and truly.
I've heard you say that before.
Yeah, your case is won or lost. And it's ironic how it all comes down to a draw of a name from a hat.
Yeah. It's really scary to think that 12 people will decide all of your hard work.
Yeah. Because I could probably walk into that courthouse. I could do a little background research and walk into that courthouse and pick out 12 people in my pool and say, I want those 12 people. But I promise you the people on the other side are going to pick up 12 different people and go, I want those 12 people. Mm-hmm. And so just the thought that you've done all this hard work and then 12 of the wrong people get picked for your pool, from the pool to get in your box. And in civil trials, we have strikes. And you can get somebody removed for any reason that used to be any reason at all. And now there's some challenges. They're called Batson challenges. And you can't remove people because of their race. And it's been expanded a little bit, not that much broadly, but it's been expanded a little bit to gender. They use Batson challenges a lot in criminal trials. Not so much in civil trials, but at the same time, if I was representing a Caucasian person and I had 4 African Americans on the jury, I couldn't use all my challenges just to get rid of the 4 African Americans. That would be blatantly racist, and someone would raise a Batson challenge, and that makes you look bad as a lawyer. And I never remove somebody because of race, never. I usually remove people because of other answers that they've given.
Mm-hmm. That kind of gives you an idea of their mentality or their background, possibly that could influence their bias.
Influence their bias. I'm looking for folks who are biased, and I'm looking for folks on the other end of that spectrum that can identify with my client. Mm-hmm. So if my client's a high school football coach and somebody else is a high school soccer coach, I might go, hey, they can identify with each other. I want that person on my team, whether that person's white, black, female, male, whatever. Mm-hmm. Just that job, they've got some commonality there. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times, like I said, your cases are won and lost. And I've had judges, we had a case one time, it was very contentious. This lady had been in an accident and couldn't get the insurance company to settle. And so we went to trial. And the insurance company had lowballed us the whole time. It was one of those that I just don't like anyway. And we had picked the jury, and we were about to do openings. And it was about at the end of the day. It was sometime near the end of the day. And the judge just called the attorneys back in his chambers. He said, before we leave, we're going to let the jury go. And before we leave, counsel meet me in my chambers, which we did. And some judges more than others will encourage you to settle. They'll ask, have y'all had any settlement discussions? Some will really twist your arm, and some will just ask those kind of questions because they have to be cognizant of the court and the scheduling for the court. And so we went back to meet with this judge, and the judge looked at the opposing attorney and Ms. Hauser owns that jury.
Wow.
He said, I don't know where y'all are in your settlement discussions, but I'm going to tell you, she owns that jury. And it just so happened that the names that had been drawn at random out of a hat were all very favorable for my client. And yeah, I was very pleased with the jury. I was like, yeah, let's roll, you know.
Yeah.
And we ended up the next day settling the case for what it was worth. But,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Do you have any other stories?
Yeah, I have one more that's just, it's always just a weird story from a long time ago.
So before you were an attorney.
It was before I was attorney, but I went to all the med-mal trials. I was the lead paralegal, and so I went to all the med-mal trials.
Ooh, so you got to kind of like have the front row seat to all of the action.
Right, and we did all the jury prep, you know. So we had done all our jury research, so very heavily involved in jury selection. And that's Sophie chiming in. Sophie's like, I don't like this story. It's boring. Give it a chance, Sophie.
Well, liven it up.
Give it a chance.
Let's jump to the interesting part. Go.
So we were in this little rural county, and we were picking a jury for a med-mal case. And I believe Mr. Walker's the one who asked the question. That would be my attorney that I was working with. I believe he's the one that asked the question. And you're just trying to get background information on the jury, you know. And a lot of times you're trying to see if they're going to tell you the truth because you already know a lot about them. So he asked this one lady, you know, where do you work? And she's like, oh, I'm a housewife. And he says something like, have you had any jobs? She said, well, last year I worked for, you know, XYZ company, whatever that was. And he says something like, well, you know, where did you work before that? And she says, before that I was abducted by aliens.
I'm sorry, what?
Exactly.
Before that she was what?
Abducted by aliens.
Like the humanoid kind or the immigrant kind?
Well, that's a good question because whenever she said that, and then she went on to say what she did before that, something like, and before that I was a cashier at the 7-Eleven or something like that.
Wow.
But whenever she said the phrase, I was abducted by aliens, all of our heads just snapped up, and the judge's head snapped, everybody's head snapped. And immediately, you know, there was a question to the court, like, you know, Your Honor, may we approach the bench?
Oh, wow.
So, you know, the attorneys go up there and have a discussion with the judge, and he doesn't even look up. He's just doodling or something on his little sheet of the box of jurors there. And there was a motion made for cause, which we've already talked about, where you can have people removed just for cause. Anyway, without even looking up, and he said, motion granted. Juror number 5, you are excused. Put another juror in the box.
Wow.
So we don't know if she was abducted by, like, space aliens or illegal immigrant aliens, or we don't know. She looked pretty normal,
Yeah.
but that's one way to get off a jury.
Ah. I'm going to just keep that in my cap. Well, this has been fun. Thanks.
Yeah, anytime. Jury stories are always great. Thank you for listening to Laughter in the Law, where we talk about the law with a lighthearted twist.